Today, we are going to be speaking with two distinguished gentlemen who have been on the show before. We'll be speaking with Steven Kenneth Destiny Bonnell II, political streamer and debater. And also, he has a much shorter name, Cenk Uygur, host of the Young Turks. So, to get us into this conversation, we recently did a poll on our YouTube channel, Unscientific. Does the Democratic Party need to move left or right, or is it fine where it is? 47% of our audience said Democrats should embrace left-wing economic populism and move further to the left. 44% either said that the Democratic Party is perfect the way it is, change nothing, or should move further to the center, deal with issues of crime and immigration in a way that more resembles the way the right talks about it, etc. I think to start with, I just want to hear about your reaction to that and which direction sounds like it's the one we need to go in.
So David, I know those questions are rough and it's hard to phrase them exactly right, but I think that you put two different things into one question and then hence it becomes misleading. So let me break it down for you. I think that
Please.
there are three different parts of the Democratic Party now, and they're usually called two different parts, but that's very wrong. So there's the establishment part. I think that's basically the part that Destiny supports. Rah rah, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, corporate Democrats who will deliver 5 to 10%, and then you're supposed to kiss their ass for it and go, "Oh my God, you changed my life so much." And it's nothing but propaganda. They do basically almost everything the donors ask them to. That's the loser wing of the party. And I don't mean that in terms of the folks who are advocating for it. God bless, everybody's got every right to advocate for what they believe in. I mean, they are literally losers. Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris lost to Donald Trump, who, is barely in double digits in IQ points. Biden nearly lost. So if you want to keep making that same mistake, a couple of decades later, there'll be no party left. But like, if we just get the best corporate robot like Pete Buttigieg, maybe he'll be the answer. No, corporate robots are by definition not the answer. So we're in a populist era. We're in an era where online media is stronger now for the first time than mainstream media. Authenticity is rewarded. And so sending out people going, "I am doing what the donors asked me to," is a disaster, epic disaster. And you've seen it with your own eyes. So I'm trying to wake people up. Now, when you go to the progressive side, everybody just goes, "Oh, progressives." But wait a minute, there's two very different camps in there.
Yep.
There's the camp that's Bernie 2016 that I'm in, that's economic populism, left-wing populists. And then there's the identitarian left, which is go maximum on crime doesn't exist, trans people should be able to play in any professional sports they like, free surgeries for detainees, on and on and on, right? And so my thesis is not one that's even, I don't even think it's arguable, let alone controversial. The corporate wing and the identitarian left wing uh, proved to be a spectacular failure in this election. Clearly the popular wing, and by the way, this is not a matter in dispute. You can just look at the polling. So the identitarian left says defund the police is going to poll really well. Latinx is going to poll really well, except it doesn't. It polls disastrously, right? And the corporate wing says, "Oh, me kissing the ass of corporations is going to poll really well." And it doesn't. It never does, right? But when you look at the populist left, you've got paid family leave, you've got $15 minimum wage, you've got lowering drug prices, on and on and on, universal health care. They all poll two-thirds or higher. So why not do the thing that's popular? So this is, and of course, there's a reason why they don't. And it's because the whole thing is built on money, 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 money. I mean, the first thing that Joe Biden took out of the first COVID relief bill was the $15 minimum wage. He was lying about it from day one. He buried that. And why? It was, again, polling over two-thirds. Why would you take that out? Why wouldn't you let the Republicans defeat it if they're going to defeat it and then use it as a tool against them to win elections? The reason you don't do any of that is because your donors ordered you not to do that.
Destiny, about to that point, Bernie Sanders said shortly after the election, I'm paraphrasing, of course, the working class abandoned Democrats because Democrats abandoned the working class. Do you think there's truth to that critique from Bernie?
No, of course not. I mean, like the again, the reality is incumbent parties all over the world lost. Like in every single country, the incumbent party lost vote share, lost seats in parliament, lost their elected leaders. I mean, like it was a referendum on inflation worldwide. We all felt it, and inflation is the thing that you feel the cumulative effects of. So there you go. I mean, like, when has there ever been a president in recent history that has been better for labor than Joe Biden? And is Trump going to be better for labor than Joe Biden or Kamala Harris would have been? Like, there's no policy foundation in that statement. And then to Cenk's point, I guess like this is the eternal mystery for progressives is that, and I've argued with so many on this, their candidates are supposedly the most popular, just nobody knows it yet. And all the positions that they have are the most popular positions. Then why do their candidates lose all their elections? Even when they're outspending opponents, they lose their elections. Why? Where are all of these progressive candidates taking Congress by storm, that are so popular and have all these popular positions? And then I'm curious what Cenk will say, but I will head off one response because I know it's going to be, well, it's because the party's opposed to them and the corporate donors. The party hated Donald Trump when he ran in 2016. Republicans hated Donald Trump when he ran in 2016. It wasn't the billionaire class and it wasn't the donor class. He genuinely got a lot of support from the party, and he eventually rose up through the ranks and he became popular and he became the nominee. And I think that if there was a progressive candidate, they could at least be winning their local races. But I mean, I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, Cenk, you're shaking your head. How do you see it?
Yeah. So first, I love talking about worldwide elections because I think it goes to exactly the point I'm making. Candidates that are for the status quo are losing everywhere. And what's interesting is they keep going. I don't get it. Brazil went left, then right, then left. UK went left, then right, then left. What's going on here? Are they left or are they right? They're not left or right. What the voters are doing is voting for change and voting for populism. And so that is your Rosetta Stone. That will tell you if the right winger or the left winger is going to win. And so even Macron was a new party when he won in stunning fashion. Then he did the standard thing that everybody else does, and then they voted against him because then he became the status quo. What is the status quo that the whole world is vomiting out right now? That's neoliberal policies. Give all the money to the very top, and don't worry, it'll trickle all over you many decades from now. As people on the left, we've been fighting against this ideology for decades. But now our leaders have been co opted by the donor class, and they say the same goddamn thing. And that's why we're losing these elections. It's not a matter of whether Donald Trump is better for labor than Kamala Harris. Of course not. But the question is, in the primary, is a candidate like Bernie Sanders better than Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris on labor? And the answer is obviously, obviously. So go towards labor, go towards change. So look, even within this election, guys, it was a perfect microcosm. When Kamala Harris first came out, Anna and I on the Young Turks said, oh my God, she's running a brilliant campaign. We're on tape saying that. Why? She came out as an economic populist in the beginning. She went after corporations doing price gouging. She went after the housing prices. She was addressing the economic needs of the average man. And then she picked Tim Walz, the most populist of any of the potential candidates. And then she took what was Joe Biden was down in the polling anywhere from 2 to 8 points nationally. She eventually sprung up to 7 points ahead nationally. She had it. And on the show, I said if the election were held today, she'd win. And that was true. And then a giant turnaround, and she lost the lead entirely and lost the election. What was the turnaround? Her brother-in-law, Tony West, who's a corporate lawyer for Uber, convinced her to kiss the ass of corporations and that was a brilliant political strategy. So what did she do? She put out a letter of 90 corporate CEOs backing her. And she started bragging about all the corporate CEOs are on my side. All the corporate CEOs are on my. I'm like, stop, stop. You're doing terrible damage, right? And then she had Mark Cuban go on every cable news show. Now, guys, remember, she's in favor of big business. Don't worry, big business. She loves big business. Then Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, all the wrong direction. And she lost the lead and she lost the election. It's right there. It happened right in front of your eyes. So now this idea that the establishment wing uses. Just because we spend billions of dollars against your progressive candidates and we have all of mainstream media lying and doing propaganda on our behalf and saying there are no donor class. The donor class doesn't affect anything. Oh my God, The billions they took in donations from corporations, it doesn't affect anyone. No, Bernie Sanders is the real problem. He's going to execute people in Central Park. Oh my God, if he actually serves the average American, it's going to be terrible. Everybody unite against him, right? And you guys all saw it with your own eyes. Think about it. In 2013, when Bernie Sanders was polling at 1% against Hillary Clinton, I did a video on the Young Turks saying that brother could actually beat Hillary Clinton in the 2016 primary. Why did I say that? Not because of Bernie. Bernie's a great guy. He means well, etc. He's got his faults like everybody does. But it's because I sensed a massive populist energy in the country, and he went from 1% to 48%. So why did he not get over the hump and get to 52%? Because the minute he got into the 40s, they went from ignoring him to he's going to execute people in Central Park. His followers are brown shirts. He's anti-Semitic. He's this, he's that. He's terrible. So yeah, with all of the media and all of the money against you, it's a little harder to win. If you don't acknowledge that, you're just being intellectually dishonest.
Do you acknowledge that, Destiny?
Hold on. Last thing. But despite all that, I helped to co-found Just Democrats. We launched it on the Young Turks, and everybody told me there's like maybe you'll get one. We got 11 people rejecting corporate PAC money into Congress. It was stunning, and we had one of the most stunning political upsets literally in American history when AOC beat Crowley, and we did that with almost no money. Okay, so even with overwhelming odds against us, anything that is remotely just a 5% fair playing field and we win. Imagine if we had the party infrastructure with us rather than against us.
So Destiny, address any of that you want, but specifically Cenk's answer to your question about why aren't the progressives winning if the ideas are so popular that Cenk said, which is when Bernie got into the 40s, the entire apparatus gets aligned against him.
I mean, it becomes an unfalsifiable claim. Like it might just be that Bernie was just too far to the left for what the Democratic Party was ready to handle, which you would expect to see reflected in the media and in the people. I mean, it becomes unfalsifiable. You can have elections where like Nina Turner is spending a ton of money and she still loses. You can have elections where the progressives are spending a lot of money and there's always a reason. It's either a new corporate donor or a new media is being biased or a new whatever. You know, all the media hated Trump. That didn't stop him in 2016. The Republican Party hated Trump. That didn't stop him in 2016. I think that at some point, like progressives will have to understand that it takes more than just, you know, screaming about the most leftist populist policies ever to get elected. We talk about like the world had a referendum on neoliberalism. No, it was just a referendum on incumbent parties. And sometimes when you vote for it, people see that it doesn't even work out. You know, it was a whole bunch of populism that moved to Brexit, and that hasn't worked out well for the UK at all. So now they're kind of trending back in the other direction. And if anything, a lot of the rejection, especially through Europe, and a lot of the reasons why those countries are tending right, have to do with fallouts from the refugee crisis still, and all of the migrants fleeing into Europe still. So I mean, like this idea that the world wants these, you know, hollow, empty populist leaders that at the end of the day don't even have great policies for them. And again, for some reason, like where are they? Why are they not taking over Congress? Like where are all of these people in Congress? You know, we had the Justice Sims that came in originally, which was awesome. But there was, I don't remember this exactly, but I remember I looked up the stat because they went from saying that like only 10% of our candidates won to like 90% of our candidates. The Justice Sims went from supporting, I think, like 70 plus candidates one season to the next election cycle, like 6. And, you know, if there was so much of this populist energy, why aren't they being elected everywhere? Like they're still representing a minority opinion in the party.
Destiny, I want to stick with you for a second. Before the election, you tweeted, if Kamala ends up winning, the entire far left, the commies, tankies, Hamas supporters, etc., need to be effing jettisoned from the party. We don't need them to win. We can turn out our own base, and they are an absolute effing cancer to be associated with. Given Trump's victory, and whatever it means to you, do you stand by that?
Yeah, 1,000,000,000,000%. I think that having to answer for
jettison you.
having to, well, but I mean, I represent far more of the party than the far left does.
Apparently you don't. Apparently you represent the loser wing.
You can, but loser
Jettison,
like every progressive candidate that is
eject.
running in all of their elections that are being tossed. They lose their primaries, they lose their actual elections. Like they're losers. They're by definition they're losers. Um, the issue is that one is the lefty media sphere will never ever support a candidate that is electable in the mainstream. They just won't. They turn on Bernie Sanders and they turn on AOC. Even those people aren't far left enough for the insanity that is the far left online now. So trying to kowtow to this like group of people who want to see like an actual communist or like this like anti capitalist or this like just somebody that's too far left that most European countries probably wouldn't even support in leadership. It's just an unrealistic proposition, unless they can actually prove, you know, some of their, I guess, merit at more local levels or even like in congressional levels rather than just like for the presidential race. That's number one. And number two, that media sphere is toxic and we have to pretend that they're part of the in-group. Again, a big benefit that Trump enjoys is when he gets attacked, Trump can run this whole media circuit on the right where every single person is sycophantically obsessed with him. He doesn't have to answer any, any attacks. He can sit there and attack the other side endlessly and relentlessly, and there's no accountability. And then your Kamala Harris or the Democratic candidate is like, okay, well, going on the right platforms is very difficult because these people are going to, rake me over the coals. And then I go to the left platforms. These people all call me corporate sellouts, donor class, whatever. Okay, well, Jesus, I've got my center left media, but they're so obsessed with trying to be fair and balanced and to try to not be not have like Trump derangement syndrome that they're going to hold me like ultra accountable. So you have these wacky, unbelievable moments where people like Walz and Vance are on stage, and the question for Walz is, didn't you lie 20 or 30 years ago about the months you were in Taiwan? And then the question for Vance is like, did you really mean it when you said you would also overturn like the next election? And we have to pretend that these two things are even. It's just ridiculous. The Democrat establishment and then the Democratic media sphere needs to do a better job at like reinforcing the voting for the in-group, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is getting your candidate elected. You can do all the activism on Twitter or whatever you want, but if you're not pushing for electable candidates to get elected, then you're engaging in slacktivism.
Cenk, feel free to respond to that however you want, but I would love to hear you address the issue Destiny's bringing up about the asymmetry when it comes to the media ecosystems. And it's not about if she had done Rogan, she would have won. I don't believe that. I don't think there's any evidence of that, but generally the question of the media ecosystem.
Yeah. So lots of thoughts here. First off, why could Trump overcome it and Bernie couldn't? You're leaving out the fact that Trump was an enormous celebrity and they literally gave him over $1 billion in free media as he was running on the Republican side. Whereas Bernie Sanders got, in his miraculous run to catch Hillary Clinton that started in 2015, where he went from 1 point to basically about 48 percentage points, ABC covered him for 7 seconds the whole year. 7 seconds. So that's what mainstream media does, because they're literally corporate media. They're multi-billion-dollar corporations. So they hate actual populists like Bernie Sanders. Fake populists like Donald Trump. Oh, it's a clown show. We're having fun. Give him a couple of $1 billion in free media and see how it turns out. Well, it turned out very poorly. And there's a conflation here between mainstream media and left-wing media. I think that the question on the debate stage that Destiny's referring to, yeah, totally outrageous, asymmetrical, ridiculous. Those two things are not comparable. That's mainstream media doing false equivalency. That's not the conversation that we're having here. We're very, very far from mainstream media. So in terms of what went wrong with the Just Democrats real quick, and then I'll come back to what should left-wing media do. So in the beginning, when the co-founders were running it, that's when we ran to 70 candidates and we were very successful. Unfortunately, all of us kind of left the building for different reasons. And then the new management decided they were going to run only a small number of races. But to be fair to them, they actually won a very high percentage of those races in the second time around. That's how they were able to build up from 4 to 11. So there's good arguments, political strategy-wise, for either direction. But what really took the steam out of Just Democrats is that the founders wanted AOC and the others to go in a populist left direction, an economically populist direction. And instead, that's very, very difficult. The reason why it's so difficult is because their colleagues get so mad at them if they talk about money in politics. Because then they all go, are you saying Hakeem Jeffries is corrupt just because he took all this money from the oil companies, the drug companies, the banks, APAC, every other lobbyist? You better not be mean to your colleagues. So they powered down on our most popular positions and they went identitarian left instead. But that is extreme. So that's why Destiny's conflating those two things. And I think, I'm not saying Destiny's doing this, but I think that a lot of people in media almost do that on purpose. A lot of them don't know it. They just think progressives means both of those things at the same time. And then they just say, oh, they're all unpopular. And a lot of times, especially mainstream media, they'll go defund the police, Latinx, universal health care. Wait, one of those things does not belong on that list. Universal health care pulls it over 70%. So you've got to separate out those two wings. Anyone who's been economically populist has done a terrific job. For example, Tim Walz. We all like Tim Walz, right? Every wing of the Democratic Party likes Tim Walz. Well, Tim Walz was an economic populist, got a lot of things passed in Minnesota, and was rewarded for it, and was very, very popular in Minnesota because he delivered for the average guy, including paid family leave, and which is actually very, very easy to pass. It's at 84% approval. It's just that the corporate wing goes, yes, I know, it would make us popular. It would help our voters. It's what we promised. It's super easy to pass, but we don't want to because our donors told us not to. Well, that's a wing that's going to get clobbered throughout the rest of time. That's the neoliberal wing. And the idea that the world is not under neoliberal rule right now is absurd. Of course we are. All the countries are under neoliberal corporate rule. And that's why the voters are rebelling against all of them. So what's the media supposed to do? Now, online media, corporate media is going to corporate media. They're always going to tell you whoever takes the most donor money is the greatest. They're leading the race with $1 billion in bribes. Bravo, bravo, terrific job, corporate Democrat, corporate Republican. And remember, guys, Trump beat the corporate Republicans. Like, you guys make it seem like, oh, hey, people are in favor of Republicans, or their voters are still, no, their voters rejected their corporate wing. And it came with a lot of baggage we're not happy with, right? But you have to give them a little bit of credit for actually, not for supporting Trump, who I think is a fake populist, but for at least rejecting Mitch McConnell, rejecting all those guys. So on our side, we say, oh, Mitch McConnell took $1 billion in corporate money throughout his career. Terrible, evil, corrupt guy. Nancy Pelosi took a same $1 billion from very similar donors, did exactly what they wanted, just like Mitch McConnell. Terrific, angel, wonderful. Yeah, you could think that, and you could do all the marketing in the world for rah, Nancy Pelosi. But at the end of the day, the American people woke up, and they know that the $1 billion, whether it goes to a Republican or a Democrat, is corruption defined. So what we should do is we should have strong primaries and really challenge our candidates, because this whole idea of anointing, how's that working out for us? So we were supposed to trust the geniuses in Democratic leadership. Oh my God, they're playing four-dimensional chess. We'll never figure out what they're doing. They're so smart. Really? Even under Obama. Okay, Obama won a couple of times, and that's a long history, and we can talk about how selfish he was. But in the meanwhile, while he was in office, the Democrats lost 1,000 seats nationwide. And by the way, the guy most responsible for that was Rahm Emanuel. And now the corporate Democrats are saying, let's bring back Rahm Emanuel to lose another 1,000 seats. Are you insane? And then they said, oh, we have to anoint Hillary Clinton. How did that turn out? We have to anoint Joe Biden. We have to anoint Kamala Harris. And by the way, Biden only won by 43,000 votes to 3 swing states. They nearly lost to this imbecile 3 times. Look, you can't say someone has despotic tendencies, is a fascist, is a moron, is the worst guy in the world, and then lose to him 2 times and say, you should put me back in charge because I know what I'm doing. No, they have proven definitively that they do not know what they're doing.
Destiny, go ahead.
I mean, there's nothing to say. Like, progressives have nothing to show for their record. They have like bad polling, like that 80% of Americans support single payer. That's not true. We've done the polling on this over and over and over again. If you poll in the most favorable manner, they support it. If you poll for what it actually is, that support plummets to like 25%.
That's not remotely true.
It is absolutely true. I don't remember if it was
You're arguing against Democratic policies. It's amazing. Why don't you just join the Republican Party?
We're not arguing about whether or not the policy is good or bad.
Well, if I can interject one thing here.
Yeah, go ahead.
From what I've seen, the polling Cenk mentions does exist, around 75% support. The polling I've seen with what we might call more specific wording, it's not that support drops to 25%, but I have seen it drop to more like 48 to 50%. I do think a lot of it's complicated because if you just ask someone, does the government have a basic level of responsibility to give people some health care? most people say yes, and also a lot of them don't necessarily know what that means. I don't know that we're going to solve whether it's a good policy based on three different polls that ask it in a different way. I don't know. I've seen the polling.
Well, no,
both
yeah,
of you
I
are
understand.
referring
I'm
to.
just saying that, like, if you want to if you want to actually pass any policy or do anything, you have to have an actual realistic understanding of what it is Americans even think before you even begin to go down the path of how do we implement it. And the reality is single payer healthcare. When you ask somebody, do you think the government should provide health insurance for people? That polls incredibly well.
Yes.
When you ask, should the government be the second question, there were all three of these were listed in a. I wish I could remember the name of the polling firm, but this is around when
I
Bernie
think
was
it's the
running.
Kaiser Family Foundation that did
It might be that. There's a second way of asking it that's more neutral of like, do you think that the government should be do you think that the government should be able to offer insurance or something for all levels? Something like that. But then the third question is, should the government be the sole provider of insurance and ban private insurance? And that one is incredibly unpopular. I think that's
Well,
the one
the
that polls
ban
at
private insurance, it's like even countries that have universal systems, they don't ban, most of them don't ban private insurance. So I don't even know why that would be included necessarily.
because that's what Bernie's plan was. Bernie's plan for healthcare was the furthest left plan of any country that would have ever existed on the face of the earth. There is
That's
no
that's
other
A,
plan.
not true, and B, you really sound like a Republican.
That's
You sound
great,
like
but I
Mitch
actually read
McConnell
the
right now.
policy, okay? So Bernie Sanders' plan included things like no copay for drugs and covered things like vision and dental and provided for a single means of both insurance and I believe delivery medicine throughout the entire country. It was more left than any other medical plan on the planet. I do agree with what you're saying, Pacman, that there are multi-payer systems. I'm a big fan of either a public option or even a single payer system, depending on how you administer it. I think it's fine. Medicare expansion, all things are fine, but you have to be honest about like where is the electorate at? How do they feel about these things? And you can't
They
just
love
constantly
these
blame
things.
donors and billionaires and even like this huge cope of calling Trump a fake populist. Trump is as populist as they come. He is one man against the system who's telling you that he's going to fight and take it all down as one person against all the corrupt donors and everything else. This is as populist as they possibly come. Populists become dictators. This is what populism is. It's the precursor to things like fascism or authoritarian regimes. You always get
do
these like
things that are
strong, great men.
unpopular. Yeah, that's a great strategy. Do things that are unpopular.
I mean, he's winning elections
Gentlemen,
on it, so yeah. And then
yeah, go ahead,
or,
Destiny.
yeah, I was just gonna say, you ruined my train of thought. Go ahead.
Sorry.
The last thing I wanted to ask
Pacman
about,
ruined my train of thought.
the last thing I wanted to ask about involves sort of both of you on Twitter. Cenk, you kind of went mega viral for responding to Elon Musk and saying, hey, put me in charge of slashing that Pentagon budget. Elon actually replied. He asked for suggestions. Don Jr. replied something like, this is being considered or it was considered. Destiny, you responded to the entire thing by saying sigh, S-I-G-H. I think my first question to you, Cenk, is, do you think they genuinely want to cut defense spending, or this entire Department of Grifty Edgelords thing is just really about cutting social programs at the end of the day? Or do you really think the Pentagon is something they would cut?
So let's look at this conversation, right? So first of all, why do I call Trump a fake populist? Because he goes rah rah average man, which I think is smart political strategy, because he's focusing on things that are popular. That's what populism is. Wow, that's rocket science to figure that out as to the correct electoral strategy. But then when he gets into office, what's his number one priority? Corporate tax cuts and delivering for his donors like Miriam Adelson. He put in Marco Rubio, Elise Stefanik, Mike Waltz, Mike Huckabee, all Team Miriam, neocon war hawks. So what happened? I thought you were anti-war. And part of what I'm doing here is some of the right-wing populists actually do agree with us on some issues. So, for example, anti-corruption. When I point out that Miriam Adelson gave Trump $137 million, and then he gave her four appointees, people even on the right wing go, yeah, that sucks. And that, we don't agree with Trump there. And that's a stunning turn of events. I've never seen that happen before, but it's actually genuinely happening online, and you should give them some credit for that. Now, on cutting, what I'm asking is, do you guys really mean it? And so if you really mean it, most of the corruption is in the Pentagon. So that's where all the pork goes, because if you question that pork, they go, you're endangering our national security. You're putting all of our lives on the line, et cetera. So they stuff it full of pork. So I said, look, guys, if you're going to do cuts, let's start at the Pentagon. I can cut $400 billion overnight for you. And what it's doing is putting them to the test. Do you really mean it or don't you? And so a couple of surprising things happen from there. First of all, if you look at my comment section, right-wing populists actually do mean it. So this is going to be really, really interesting. So then Elon and Don Jr. say, yeah, we mean it too. And they follow through on at least one of the proposals that I mentioned, which was, hey, a lot of these contracts go to these defense contractors because the generals, after they retire, go to work for those defense contractors, and that gives them an incentive to sell us out and to buy all these bloated programs because they're literally going to get paid by those same companies. And if they say yes, you're right, which is where they are today, and we should stop that, so that conflict of interest, well, that's a left wing position that we've been arguing for 20 years. I'll take it. That's fantastic. And that's the unity that mainstream media pretended that they were in favor of, but only when they were doing corporate deals for tax cuts for the rich, etc. Now we have some potential actual unity. At the same time, I'm not a sucker. I've been in this game a long time. So is it possible that they don't cut the Pentagon and instead they cut social spending? Of course, of course, that's more likely, right? But at least the very first conversation we're having online about what to cut is the Pentagon. Perfect. You can't ask for anything better from the left wing populist way of looking at it.
So, Destiny, tell us about the reason for the sigh. Is it that you think Cenk's being naive, that they're not really going to cut, or that he's barking up the wrong tree here?
I don't think they plan on cutting. I don't even like the conversation. I feel like there's so many issues I have with this. When progressives and really with anybody talks about taxes or anybody talks about budgets, like the conversation, people always talk about like taxes like they're either this like tool of punishment or self-flagellation, or it's like this noble way of. I think that we should figure out what are the government programs that we want to fund and why. Okay. So do we want single payer healthcare? Do we want expansion of Medicare? Do we want to do SNAP and WIC and benefits programs? Do we want to have tax subsidies for electric cars and solar? Like we figure these things out. Once we figure that out, we have our liabilities. Okay. This is how much we owe. And then we need to figure out how do we raise the money for it. Okay. Do we tax people? Do we tariff? Do we whatever? Like how does the government fund these programs? That should be the totality of the conversation about taxes. These arbitrary obsessions with like, we got to slash the Pentagon by X dollars. We have to slash the military. We're like, why? What do you want to cut? Like, let's talk about that. Do we like, was the F-35 program a mistake? Do we want to have, like no military presence around the world? Do we shut down all of our bases? Do we want to have no more funding towards any type of participation? They're like, what do we actually want to cut? Because the random thing, like imagine, and it's so crazy to me too, especially because like Cenk is a business owner and all these other guys are business owners. You walk in, you ask, okay, I come into your business and you want to cut things. Like, is it just, I'm going to cut 40% of my budget? Did you just fire randomly like 40% of your employees? Or like, no, well, you look at departments maybe that aren't making money. You look at parts of your business maybe you don't need, but it's never just like randomly like, okay, we're going to cut half our thing today, unless you've got like a loan that's being called in and you have to pay up or something. So I mean, like that's one part of it. The second part of it is it's okay. So to be fully transparent, I'm unhinged now when it comes to dealing with conservatives. I'm more concerned about turning out base than ever appealing to these insane people. There is no principled foundation to what conservatives believe regarding anything having to do with foreign policy or the military. The exact same people who will say there were no wars under Trump will ignore the fact that he hid how much more we were drone striking people in Yemen. People will say there were no more wars under Trump, and they'll ignore the fact that we allowed, the allies that we had in Syria to die. We'll say no more wars under Trump. We'll ignore the fact that Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, that the United States bombed a Syrian airport, that Assad was chemically gassing his people still, that border riots were raging on in the Gaza Strip. Like, it's just, it's ridiculous. So for the first time ever, Russian troops were engaging with Ukrainian troops directly in the Donbass, I think in 2018. This idea that like Trump has some allegiance to some foreign policy position where it's like, oh, we're going to cut military spending is absolutely not true.
Well, even more so
yeah.
then. I mean, if that's true and they'll consider cutting something because Cenk's bringing it up, isn't that a reason for him to be involved rather than saying, this is a waste of time? I don't know.
I mean, I just hope that people are aware of what I just need people to be aware of like what's going on. Like if you get like oh well, they managed to cut $50 million from the military budget and that money was like all earmarked for the VA or something, like that's not a good thing. Right? Like we want we want something. I wish that people just spoke in policies more rather than like we need to tax billionaires because we hate them, or like we need to give tax cuts to billionaires because they save us, or we need to do that. It's like what are the policies that we want to support? What do we want to cut from the military? What do we like? That's I think the more important conversations.
Cenk?
It's amazing. I mean, unfortunately, this is proving at least part of MAGA's point here, which is Destiny is now defending the Pentagon against cuts. Like, that's the neocons. And then we brought in the neocons, the Liz Cheneys and the Dick Cheneys. I don't
Wait,
want
should
to
we
be that
abolish our
party.
entire military?
No, of course not. I'm going to tell you what to do in a second. But this idea of like, don't touch the Pentagon.
Wait, I
and
never
bring-
said don't
and
touch the
bring-
Pentagon. I just said name what you want to get rid of. I didn't say don't
Okay.
touch it. I just said
So,
name the
but
policy.
you're happy to are you happy to have the conversation about cutting the Pentagon first?
If you have a thing you want to cut from it, then yeah, sure.
Okay. So like, you're not like, even as a general thing, you're like, well, I'm not sure about cutting the Pentagon. That's amazing to me. So why did I pick the Pentagon? Well, first of all, I would much rather have that than cutting social programs. But more importantly, that's where all the waste is. And that's not theoretical or hypothetical. It's real. They just failed their 7th audit in a row just yesterday. And in the last audit that they failed, they said we can't find $400 billion. Well, if you can't find it, then you're not going to miss it. So that's why I say $400 billion. In 2015, they buried a report that said they had done $125 billion in wasteful spending and didn't know where it went. Not a million, 125 billion. So they're just robbing us blind. The central area of the robbery is the Pentagon. It's not
Just
about
when we
keeping
say
us
when we
safe.
say this money is gone, is this like they can't account for it, or is this like there are certain projects that maybe an Office of Inspector General can't have insight to without clearance, so we don't know? Because you're making
No.
it sound like the money is just like what they're pocketing
Gone.
it, or what?
They can't account for it. They
Well,
literally
there is a
say,
difference, though, Cenk, between spent on stuff we don't know versus we can't account for it. Those are two different things, admittedly. And I don't know if we have visibility into, is the money gone or are they not able to account for the program spending?
I can't believe I'm having this conversation with two people on the left.
No,
theoretically.
Cenk, to be clear, I'm with you on cutting. I'm with you 1,000% on cutting Pentagon. I even would tell you specific things I would cut. My only gripe is I don't know from what I've seen that when they say unaccounted for, it means spent on mystery stuff. I don't know that that's accurate, but I'm with you 100% on cutting.
And so when Elon asked for specific suggestions, I said, look, the reason I did the conflict of interest on the generals first, number one, every real person agrees. The only people who don't agree are, the corporate guys who are like, oh, well, of course, once we retire, we should be able to take millions of dollars from these different corporations we've been serving all along. So, but in terms of the budget, I said in my tweet, obviously you'd have to go line by line. If the Pentagon says to me, there's $125 billion in wasteful spending and we don't know where it is, how am I supposed to tell you where it is? They just told us they don't know where it is. So if you give me the details of the plan, look, this is now fantastical, right? Is there any chance that Elon goes, hey, you know what? Cenk's a businessman. He went to Wharton like I did. He's a genuine populist. All right, let's bring him in and let's look at the line items one by one and the Pentagon budget and then take out the wasteful spending. If we did that, do you have any idea how happy the American people would be? And that would be actual unity. They would love it. And we could show them, here's the waste. Here's the thing that didn't work. Here's how they spent 8,000. They did a markup of 8,000% on soap dispensers at Boeing, et cetera, et cetera. Now, are they really going to do that? Probably not. Probably they're going to say, oh, yeah, first we're going to cut Medicaid, Medicare, and everything that helps the average man, and we'll get back to the Pentagon later. That's probably how it'll go. But even if that's how it goes, now a lot of the right-wing populists go, wait a minute, I thought you said you were going to cut the Pentagon. I'm in favor of cutting them. Guys, take the win. Right-wing populists are saying cut the Pentagon. This is what we've been dreaming about our whole lives. And now you're against it. That just doesn't make any sense at all. Take the win.
I'm for it. I don't know. I'm certainly not against it. I think the question is, as you're pointing out, at the end of the day, they probably won't do it. If we get people thinking it's a good idea, it still is a win, right, Destiny?
If they cut the Pentagon?
If they say to
Spending?
Cenk on Twitter, we're going to consider that, and then they don't do it, and then right-wingers go, hey, you said you were going to do it, but you didn't do it. That's still a win of sorts.
That would never. You're implying a world where the right wing has the accountability for literally anything they do ever. Which will
They've never done
ever,
it, but
ever
theoretically.
happen. Yeah. I mean,
No,
like
that's not true,
theoretically, theoretically, in a
that they
world
do
where
hold
I can
accountable,
wave a
Cenk?
magic wand.
So I think MAGA has changed in a way that the rest of the country and media ecosystem does not understand. So MAGA in the old days was yes, daddy, harder daddy, right? And so these days, does that wing of MAGA still exist? Absolutely. If Trump, the demigod, says something, they're going to change their position and support him completely. But there is a different wing of right wing populists now, and I see them openly disagreeing with Trump on Israel, on and on several other issues. So maybe I'm wrong, and then you guys will get to say, "Oh, I can't believe it. You thought that there was any right wing populist who actually meant anything and had principles. That's such a joke." They all wound up saying, "No, add to the Pentagon. Let the generals take any job they want. Israel first, America eighth." If it turns out I'm wrong about that, and all the right wing populists were frauds, and they all just fall in line and do whatever Trump demands of them, including following all of his donors' dictates, then okay, I'll own up to being wrong. But I think that right wing populism does exist, and it will challenge Trump on some things, and probably Israel first.
Yeah, the party that elected the guy who's working with the richest man in the world and has now put him in charge of a faux government agency to cut government spending as this guy enriches himself by tens of billions of the I'm sorry, I'm not buying that one at all. That's an unbelievable position to actually be in. That as much as we might hate the corporate donor class or whatever, and then vote for Donald Trump, who literally received how much media coverage? Like, how much did Elon spend? $44 billion to buy Twitter to turn it into a Trump marketing platform? That's unreal to me that anybody would think that something good is coming from that.
All right. Well, listen, we're making predictions about the future. We won't know today whether it will or won't happen. So let's put a pause on the conversation there. Steven Kenneth, Destiny, Bonnell II, and Cenk Uygur. Always great having both of you guys on.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks.